In 1901, Thomas Edison held in his hands a battery that he believed would power the world. It used iron, it used nickel oxide, it ran on potassium hydroxide electrolyte, and honestly, it was essentially indestructible. Original units from the early 1900s have been recovered, recharged, and tested in the modern era. They hold a charge. After 100 years, this battery never made it to your home. It never became the standard. And the reason it didn't has nothing to do with performance, and everything to do with profit. Today we're pulling it out of the history books and putting it back where it belongs, in your hands. Welcome back to In the Beginning. Today's topic sits right at the intersection of forgotten technology, corporate history, and genuine energy independence. And it is one of the most fascinating stories I've ever researched for this channel. We're talking about the nickel-iron battery, Edison's battery, the one that was supposed to replace lead acid last a lifetime and give ordinary homeowners a power storage option that would never need replacing. And alongside this story, I want to recommend the Off-Grid Solar Power Bible, because once you understand this battery technology, the next logical step is pairing it with solar. That book covers exactly how to do that from a practical, accessible standpoint. Link is in the description. Now, let's go back to 1901. The nickel-iron battery is deceptively simple in its chemistry. The negative electrode is made of iron. The positive electrode is nickel oxide. Both are submerged in an aqueous potassium hydroxide electrolyte, a strongly alkaline solution. When the battery charges and discharges, ions move between the iron and nickel plates through the electrolyte in a reaction that is remarkably stable and reversible. Unlike lead-acid batteries, which experience progressive plate sulfation that permanently degrades capacity, nickel-iron chemistry doesn't accumulate irreversible byproducts. The plates don't corrode meaningfully over time. The electrolyte can be refreshed. The battery can be deep discharged repeatedly without damage, something that kills a lead-acid battery within a few hundred cycles. Edison himself claimed his battery would last a lifetime. He wasn't exaggerating. Batteries from the 1920s and 1930s have been recovered from old railway and telephone systems, given fresh electrolyte, recharged, and they work. Not at full capacity in every case, but functional, after a century of sitting in storage. This is not an incremental improvement over lead-acid. It's a fundamentally different category of technology, one that was designed from the ground up for durability rather than disposability. So why don't we all have nickel-iron batteries in our homes? The answer lies in the early automotive industry. When electric cars and gasoline cars were competing in the early 1900s, the question of which battery to use was genuinely open. Edison was developing the nickel-iron cells specifically for electric vehicles. He believed it was superior, and technically he was right. But the electric starter motor changed everything. When Charles Kettering's self-starter became standard in gasoline cars around 1912, it required a battery capable of delivering extremely high current in short bursts. The cranking amps needed to turn over a combustion engine. Nickel-iron batteries, with their internal resistance characteristics, struggled with this specific demand. Lead-acid batteries handled it better. That single application, the electric starter, established lead-acid as the automotive standard. And once the automotive industry locked in, the entire battery manufacturing ecosystem followed. Investment went into lead-acid. Infrastructure was built around lead-acid, and nickel-iron, which wasn't actually designed for high-burst cranking applications, was sidelined. The financial dynamics then took over. Lead-acid batteries degrade. They need replacing every 3 to 5 years. In an economy built around replacement cycles, a battery that lasts 100 years is not a product. It's a one-time sale. The industry's preference became structurally embedded in purchasing patterns, building codes, and consumer expectations. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented business history. The incentives were real, and they shaped which technologies got investment and which ones got shelved. Here's where the story becomes remarkable. Amish communities, who maintain a studied skepticism toward technologies that create dependency on external systems, discovered surplus nickel-ion batteries decades ago. Railroad companies, telephone exchanges, and industrial facilities had been using these batteries for decades and were decommissioning them as they modernized. The Amish acquired them cheaply and quietly. They used these batteries to store power from windmills and later small solar arrays. They charged them during the day, drew from them at night, and found that the batteries simply didn't quit. A battery acquired in the 1960s was still being used in the 1990s. Stories of cells lasting 40, 50, 60 years in active daily use are not rare in Amish communities. They're the norm. And then there's the secret that was found documented in a 1947 notebook from an agricultural research station. A small addition to the electrolyte, lithium hydroxide, added at approximately 20 to 40 grams per litre, was found to dramatically reduce the degradation of iron plates over time. Iron oxidation, which can gradually reduce capacity, is the one known weakness of nickel-iron chemistry. Lithium hydroxide suppresses this mechanism. With this additive, the battery's iron plates maintain their integrity almost indefinitely. The working lifespan extends from decades to effectively unlimited with electrolyte maintenance. A battery that already lasted 100 years without this additive, with it, the ceiling disappears. Now here's the part you came for. You can build functional nickel-iron battery cells at home for under $5 per cell using materials available at any hardware store or online supplier. The basic approach: glass jars serve as the cell containers, mason jars work perfectly, steel wool or iron mesh forms the negative plates. Nickel-plated hardware or nickel oxide powder on a steel substrate forms the positive plates. The electrolyte is potassium hydroxide, or lye, dissolved in distilled water at approximately 30% concentration, available from soap-making suppliers. Cells are connected in series to achieve desired voltage. Each cell produces approximately 1.2 volts nominal, and in parallel to increase capacity. A basic 12-volt bank of cells built in glass jars can power LED lighting, phone charging, small fans and low-draw appliances through a simple inverter. This is not a replacement for a whole-house power system, but it is a parallel power system, a backup layer that requires no permits in most jurisdictions, no utility interaction, and no ongoing costs beyond occasional electrolyte replenishment with distilled water. Pair this with even a small solar panel array, and I point you again to the Off-Grid Solar Power Bible in the description for the complete solar integration guide, and you have the foundation of genuine energy independence that costs a fraction of commercial battery systems and will outlast them by decades. The Amish didn't wait for the industry to offer them a better option. They recognized what was already sitting in railway surplus depots, understood the chemistry, and built their own quiet grid independence. That option is available to you today. Edison built a battery in 1901 that our grandchildren could still charge. The industry built a business model around batteries you throw away every few years. Those two things were fundamentally incompatible, and the business model won. But the chemistry didn't change. The physics didn't change. The iron and the nickel and the potassium hydroxide still work exactly the way they worked 120 years ago. And now you know about it. Build a cell, test it, then build 10 more. Post your results in the comments. I want to see what you create. If this video sparked something in you, share it with someone who should know this. Like it, subscribe to In the Beginning, and let's keep recovering the knowledge that was never supposed to disappear. See you next time.